Hello there, and welcome back to Triton Squadron. I'm your host, Liam, and today I'm here with Suthanth and Shane, and we are talking about the Fandom Menace. Would one of you like to start us off by talking about what exactly that is?
I defer to Shane on this one.
I saw that. Boy, how to be polite, and keep this family oriented and appropriate for this podcast. In the nicest terms, the Fandom Menace. First off, for those of you who I don't know how you couldn't tell this, but I'm gonna put some dots together for you. Couldn't tell. It's a playoff of the title of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Shocking, I know. The Fandom Menace, in the most nice way to say it, they are individuals who do not like the direction a Star Wars media property franchise decision makes and decides to be rather vocal about their disregard for the choices made in that particular material. In recent years, they've kind of crystallized into we can call it a community of people who do not like the choices of Star Wars. Now, note that I'm not being very specific there for a reason. I think that a lot of people associate the Fandom Menace with the Disney era because a lot of people who do make that association are a part of the Fandom Menace, and Disney is who they are currently targeting. But this has existed for pretty much the entire history of Star Wars. Notably, the prequels got a lot of hate from the Fandom Menace, though I don't think they were called that back then. And even some of the original trilogy decisions got hate from this group. So, I mean, it's a group that, more broadly, from what I can observe, they do not like the direction a piece of Star Wars material has taken, and they feel the need, often way more often than is necessary, to tell everyone else around them of their disregard for the current choices in Star Wars. And also everyone that isn't around them, seeing as they seem to have infested the internet. And unfortunately, the number for pest control does not appear to be working because they're still there. So, again, I'm trying to be nice and polite with this. I saw a shocked look on both of my fellow podcasters' face when I said this. Generally, a lot of folks outside of the Fandom Menace, it should probably be known, do not hold the particular methodology in which these individuals utilize to show their discontent. We don't necessarily approve of that methodology, a lot of people in the overarching Star Wars community. That sum it up for you?
Yes, that was a great summary. Thank you. I'm just going to start off by saying that I don't have much experience with the internet side of the Fandom Menace. I've met people IRL that have trash opinions and did not enjoy talking to them. But really, the only content creator I really ever watch, and I don't even watch him all that much, is Star Wars Explained. I like him a lot. I've heard about this guy Star Wars Theory. I've heard him talked about a lot.
Please don't. No Star Wars Theory.
Run! Opinion, but
it's a trap.
But yeah, my experience with the Fandom Menace has pretty much been confined to people I talk to for a singular conversation and then try to avoid them after that.
Well, for me, most of my Star Wars conversations were over the internet. Most of my life has been colored over by Fandom Menace people. Got revitalized into Star Wars around episode 7 or the lead up to that. There was a lot of excitement to it. Most people were really annoyed, I guess. I know there were some pushback because of casting decisions of having Finn and Rey be the main characters, but once you reach post episode 7 up to 2020, around, I want to say, Mando season 2, that was the worst time to be a Star Wars fan in a line. It's just okay, I get it, you didn't care for The Last Jedi, that doesn't mean it did negative things to you personally. Some of the words being used were really?
Yeah, I'm first of all, if you hear any of us laughing at any point, it's a laugh of pity and empathy because we've probably all faced it. Yeah, so a few things for those who are listening to this podcast, if you couldn't already tell by listening to me, that you might not be able to see, is I love doing fight choreography. So I guess that's strike one. A strike two in dealing with the Fandom Menace is I am a very masculine presenting straight white guy, which for some reason in the Fandom Menace, a lot of people, both IRL and on the internet, makes them think that I'm going to agree with them. I don't. And so I have seen a disproportionate amount of individuals, I would say, fall into this, both in person and over the internet. And typically, as a fight choreographer, these conversations often pop up in the usual suspect places. Looking at you, Reddit. And inevitably, the challenge is I'm in general like a very franchise-oriented nerd in my content, like consumption. I love a lot of franchises: Star Wars, Star Trek, Cobra Kai, Marvel. Like, there's a lot of different Lord of the Rings, a lot of different franchises I really like. And for some reason, it's the Star Wars fans, my dudes. It's the Star Wars fans. I can't go into a Cobra Kai forum and talk about a season of Cobra Kai without some dude bringing up the throne room fight in The Last Jedi. So I have seen a disproportionate amount, and it's oftentimes I'm one of the people that they get into fights with, because they'll be like, "Oh, did you see the fight choreography in The Last Jedi? It was awful." And I'm the guy who's like, "Actually, I really enjoyed it and I liked it, and they made some really bold choices, and there were some really cool like martial arts included in there that don't typically get included in Western cinema that I was really happy to see, and the fight choreography was pretty good." And they're like, "No, you don't know what you're talking about." And I'm the guy who's like, "You've literally never picked up a sword, dude, in mom's basement. I actually fight for fun and choreograph fights and am training to be able to fight. So yes, I do know what I'm talking about. Please go away, stranger over the internet." So I don't know, kind of a tangent and a side rant, but I feel like all of us by the end of this episode will have tangents and side rants we have told, because that's another thing about the Fandom Menace. When you encounter them, like, you can't discuss them without going off on a side tangent where you go, "Well, this one time," because I don't know, there's just something about them. They're just so memorable in the worst of ways.
For those unfamiliar about like what Shane was talking about, or just to remember the climax of Last Jedi well, most people just fell onto this thing about Rey versus Kylo and the Praetorian Guards. There's just like some issues, or like maybe something with CG, or just like multiple shots where there was like one of the weapons was just disappeared or something, and then there was like some weird usage of the Force, and people just stuck to that for like years, like even to the lead up to episode 9. It's like, please get a life. Just get a life.
They need to join the Please Get a Life Foundation. Shout out to all my Animaniac fans who get that reference.
I'm gonna be honest, I never like saw any of the discourse over that scene. I guess it's probably because I tend to like not care about anybody else's opinion on Star Wars. I like to form my own opinions and make my own analyses, which is why I don't watch a lot of other content creators, because I really don't care about their opinions, whether or not they're being nice about it. So I personally thought that the Praetorian Guard scene was fucking awesome. I didn't realize that so many people had a problem with it. So this is news to me.
Yeah, I'm going to go on the books right now about that Praetorian Guard scene, okay? I promise it will be short, but we gonna get some stuff out of the way while interacting with these people, because I think that we can all agree that we may want to limit the discourse on this particular scene, because there's so much more to discuss, because they never go away. Here's my thoughts. As a guy who, I'm going to qualify myself in the most annoying way by just listing the things I've done. I did 16 years of professional amateur theater and film and performance. Like, I have an IMDb. I'm not bragging. This is me qualifying what I do. I've done fight choreography for 5 years. I have performed that fight choreography in front of others. I've made little fight films, all that fun stuff. I've done all the stuff that you do while building up a little bit of a resume in the theater and acting scene and in the fight scene, and I've created my own films as well. So, with all of that qualifiers in mind, person over internet who's listening to this and immediately wants to hit the keyboard from their mom's basement and tell me how I'm wrong. Also, please wipe off the Cheeto dust before you do. No holds bar. So, here's the thing about fight choreography. It is incredibly hard. Like, it is incredibly hard. When you film fight choreography, you are easily doing multiple days of just one scene if you're doing a larger fight, where you're doing that fight over and over and over and over, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours with short breaks in between. All of the people who are dressed in the Praetorian Guard outfits are in outfits that look really cool but don't move very well. And all of them are stunt trainers. But those outfits also, they're hot. Even if you have some sort of cooling system on the inside, they are very hot, right? It's very challenging. And Rian Johnson and his fight directors, they made a few incredibly bold decisions that limited and informed the entire scene. First thing I'm going to point out, there is 40 feet of curtains behind these people, at least. They lit it on fire, and did the take while something was burning down beside them, right? Which, from a continuity standpoint, is a nightmare. 2, that fight scene is very, very large. There's 6 guards, at least, and then the 2 fighters that are our main actors. 3, our main actors were chosen for their acting abilities, and they're both absolutely phenomenal. Come at me like freaking internet chads. I still will die on the hill that both of those actors are amazing. Daisy Ridley is a glorious actress who played the role very well, as did Adam Driver. Come at me, internet fanboys. But they were chosen for their acting capability. Of the 2, Adam Driver clearly naturally picks up a weapon fairly decently. May or may not have something to do with the fact that he was literally in the military before becoming an actor, but I can't speak to that. He also has a great presence on screen, but he's clearly not a guy who spent however many years Kylo did training with a sword. Same thing with Daisy Ridley, where she picks up fight choreography pretty well, but clearly this is not her native thing that she does for fun, right? Somewhere along the line, the DP and the director and the fight directors decided, hey, you know what would be really cool? Let's do a few long takes of their full bodies. Now, I don't know about you, but when I do fight choreography and I'm working with somebody who isn't necessarily super on point with their fighting, I never allow full shots of the full body of all the actors, because even the slightest miscalculation in stance will change it from you look really, really good and you're looking like a really competent fighter to I don't know what I'm doing and I clearly only did this for a week before filming. So they made a few really bold choices. The complaints that I've seen online are literally a knife didn't go away and this kick was bad. This one push kick was bad. It is an extended fight sequence with things on fire and full shots of the full body of 8 people. And the complaints you have that you think it ruined Star Wars forever is a knife disappeared and one bad teep. I don't know about you, but when I look at the fight choreo for something like that, I call that a stupendous victory. That's your complaint? They could have ruined the whole thing with those choices, but you only found 2 of the tiniest, slightest, most minutely stupid details to pick up on. I don't know. I personally, my view on the throne room scene in the Last Jedi, I said they did a really good job. I loved seeing some of the guys in the background who were using Filipino martial arts and were using it in the actual fighting. Some of those weapons were clearly based on that as well. That is a style that does not get anywhere near enough love in Western cinema. They did a really good job. They did a bang-out job. They did a stellar job. They have CG for a reason. Yes, they CG'd out a knife because they were doing 8 hours. So, naturally, they might forget something in a take. That's fine. It's fine. It was a really, really well done fight scene. And for every single thing that has been picked apart of that scene, I can and will go head to head and pick apart scenes from the people who make this argument's favorite fights. Because typically, the comparison I see when people talk about it is they talk about the Darth Maul fight in episode 1. And I'm like, do you want to open that can of worms? Because I will ruin that for you. It's fun. It's fighting. Except that it's fun. We got space wizards. Why are you fighting over a knife?
I think one of the defining features of this group of people is that even if they don't like like a specific part of something. Like this fight we're talking about is a perfect example of this. They didn't like it, but they also expect it to be completely perfect. Like if you don't like it, then why do you even care that, oh no, that kick was bad, oh no, they fucked up the CGI, like they and they also like to pretend that they know what they're talking about, and it's just so annoying to listen to these people talk about something they don't have experience with, and listen to them talk about something that they, like, by their logic, they shouldn't even care about that much. Like it's not a super big deal, yet they need to make it a super big deal so they can hear themselves talk and pretend that they're smart.
Counterpoint, Liam, but it ruined my childhood and did unspeakable things to everything.
I gotta say, I'm a kid who, like, Star Wars was a defining feature growing up, and got a little bit of shade for it because everyone else wanted to be into cool people things, and I was into the space. I almost said space lizards. I was not into Trandoshans. But
my roommate in my first year of college was like, his favorite species was Trandoshans, and I'm just, bro was a scaly. Like,
oh boy, he's into the Illuminati stand-in that practices slavery. Okay, but no, I was. What does it say about Star Wars and how seriously we should be taking it that I nearly had a slip and said space lizards, and then we cracked a joke, but then realized, oh, there are actually space lizards in this franchise. Yeah, like it's a thing where it's like I was into the space wizard stuff, and other kids were into like actual, like, quote unquote cool people things, right? Even then, like, I recognized what it was. Like, this was a defining thing in my childhood, but it doesn't ruin my childhood that Luke became a sad old man. Because if you think about it, there was literally a Patton Oswalt joke like 10 years ago about how George Lucas made all his characters young and sad in the prequels. That's just the nature of the game. Like, they're fun films. The directors get to make interesting choices, and we all get to enjoy that. Taking it as anything more than that, I'm going to start worrying about you.
I want to hear your takes on what the Fandom Menace likes to determine as political, because a lot of what I see people comment on as, oh, Disney's making this political now, it's not actually politics. These, like, a lot of people who like to claim something is too political seem to not know what politics actually is. The original trilogy, that was political. That was literally an allegory for World War II. That was politics. Arguing about representation of underrepresented groups in Star Wars, which is something we're seeing a lot more often now, that's not what politics is. So what do you guys have to say about that?
I mean, it comes down to two different terms. Like, as you said, there's like underrepresented groups and different like political systems, kind of like what the prequels and the original trilogy touched upon. I see more of the former, where it's like, what do you mean there's a character, not even like a protagonist, now it's just evolved into, you have a character who's not white, presumably straight, and a guy, but that's like instantly political. I haven't seen much of the pushback to Andor yet, but I assume there will be some people who will be like, this is some form of collectivism and advocating for, like, I don't know, communism or something, and that makes it political as well. I assume if we had the people in the current Fandom Menace back in the prequels, they would be just railing on it, saying, what do you mean you're critiquing larger forms of parliamentary government and how it leads to destabilization and leads to authoritarianism? But you don't see much of that now, which is weird.
Yeah, I'll throw in there that apparently it's political that you're now allowed to have more than one black person in any trilogy at any given time. Apparently that's politics. I'm flashing back to the Donald Glover like SNL skit where he did like a fake convention for every black person in Star Wars, and there were like 4 people that showed up. Like, and they're like, "Yep, this is it. This is all the black people in the galaxy." But like, oh man, it's a thing where it's like controversial to say this, but even when Star Wars critiques politics, it critiques it in the safest way. Like, if you think about it, the thing that all the characters are striving to get, right? The rebellion is striving to rebuild, the Jedi are striving to protect, all our good guy analogs. It's still basically like a capitalist representative democracy. So basically, what they are seeking to protect is exactly what like 90% of the world has right now. Like, it's not even doing a critique that's an actual critique. It's more like a critique where it's like, oh no, fascism question mark. Like,
I see that in like any Empire era content. It's just like, oh, fascism's bad. Like, let's explore that, and that's
yeah,
kind of it.
it's like it's like the like biggest like I once read one political science book and now feel like I want to comment on the whole like the whole system type
That's what the Fandom
mentality.
Menace does too. Like the media does it, and then the Fandom Menace is like, we're gonna do that too because we also don't know what we're talking about.
Bold of you to assume they read. Oh, we're gonna get so much shade on the internet for this. It's gonna be
Oh my
great.
God.
This better blow up, I swear.
If this episode doesn't get like 100,000 views,
Somebody
Oh,
put this in.
gosh.
Somebody put this like not ironically in the saltier than crate Reddit. Like, no, but like I feel like the Fandom Menace is equating pretty much everything that exists nowadays into politics, and I think that we're just gonna step outside of Star Wars for a second, without saying anything controversially political. Even though it will be controversial to the Fandom Menace, even though it's not actually controversial, it kind of reflects how we talk about politics now in society, where we are currently in politics is kind of like a sine wave if you think about it. Sometimes it goes up and it's divisive, sometimes it goes down and it's not. We're in one of those more quote unquote divisive times, which is hilarious to somebody who's not a fucking moderate centrist, because I'm like, this is divisive, this is divisive. In the 20s we had a like our third biggest political party was like the Socialist Party, but we're divisive now. But so if you think about like the conversation for how we talk about politics now in the broader world, and then we talk about the conversation that happens online and in person about Star Wars, you can find a lot of parallels with how we talk about real world politics and how people perceive the potential existence for politics in Star Wars. Where if there's a person who is already riled up politically, they already like are really into the feels on their political beliefs, those people tend to be the ones who fight more heavily for Fandom Menace or not Fandom Menace, either end of the spectrum in the Star Wars like conversations. And you see the same people arguing the same points over and over again in the Star Wars fandom, in the Cobra Kai fandom, and Lord of the Rings got it real bad with Rings of Power. I feel bad for those filmmakers. Somehow Bridgerton is unscathed. Probably because they have a really bad relationship with sexual activity in that show. So it's got its own controversy it's dealing with. But like all of the big franchise shows, right? You see the same argument over and over and over. And if you look at it long enough, you start to see, oh my goodness, these are the exact same arguments we're having right now in society as a whole. So I think that's probably part of the fuel. They feel that Star Wars is political because they're in the middle of being deep in the feels about real world politics. And whether or not Star Wars is actually political in any way, shape, or form doesn't matter. It matters how they feel because emotions are more important than facts, apparently.
moving on, do we want to talk about any specific creators, good or bad? I'm not sure how comfortable we
Please.
are.
Please. I am ready to start some fights. Please.
All right, Shane. Who do you want to start a fight with?
Oh, I was going to actually say that y'all should start first because I spend a lot of time talking, but I could.
Oh, okay. Well, the only Star Wars like creator on YouTube, at least that I watch, is Star Wars Explained, and I don't even watch him that much because, like I said before, I don't care about other people's opinions, whether or not they're like good opinions, trash opinions, whatever. But I do watch a few of his review videos. He has really good takes. I watched, I think, his review on the finale of Andor, and I very much enjoyed that video of his. But I mean, otherwise, I haven't encountered any like creators I don't like, any other creators that I do like. So what are your guys' experiences with internet content creators?
I'm not sure how relevant he is right now, but back in like 2016, 2017 era, there was a guy called Dash Star. I think he might go by Laura Star now. He used to make like kind of cool, like about niche Legends era topics of like, ooh, what happened to Luke's lightsaber once it got lost, or what happened to Luke after he got exiled from the New Jedi Order, stuff like that. And it's like, that's kind of cool for me because back in high school, I didn't have time to read like 20 odd books to figure out, okay, what happened to Luke after Return of the Jedi? What happened to the Millennium Falcon? Why did it blow up like 3 times in the book? Legends is just weird. And then like he, alongside some other people, I think Shane would love to get to, was like one of the early proponents of like Last Jedi, Ryan Johnson, the Star Wars and Luke. Some kind of like fell off, and I just went through his like subscription feed a few days ago, and it's like just like blaming Disney for like ruining the franchise, and it's like you're a dime a dozen, buddy.
Yeah. So here's a quick conversation lesson to all the Fandom Menace people who are listening. So there's a thing that I did that maybe you should try. It's called step up, step back, where you step up when you need to say something, but you also know to step back and let other people talk. So that notice how I let them talk and now I'm talking. That's how that works. Please do that.
Yeah, we just showed you how.
Yeah, like literally practical. Here's a real world skill that we just did. I know there's not many, but oh man, I'm gonna get so much shade. Dude, our entire comments is just gonna be like, oh, screw that Shane guy, he's so mean. Oh man. This is the most fun I've had on a podcast in a while. I'm not even sorry. But so, okay, these are always fun, by the way, Fandom Menace. Don't take that out of context and say, see, he doesn't have fun when they talk about lore. Oh, no, I do. It's just more fun to make fun of you. So I have to also do a thing that the Fandom Menace is not very good at, but here, it's a teachable moment. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. That's important. Please do that. So in our club, we are still working on it, which is why it isn't necessarily fully like most. I think most of the general club members haven't seen it yet. But the Jedi Masters, officers of the club, we've been working on a document that we eventually, hopefully, can disseminate to the club that kind of gives like some good guidelines for looking at fan content and some like generally some just safe bets for fan content. And obviously that changes over time because like a great thing to mention, like the Suthanth mentioned, is like, hey, there were content creators that now are kind of off the rails who used to be really big proponents of some of the things that are controversial, right? And so like over time that document will change to reflect that. But for now, like huge shout out to the credit where credit is due. Huge shout out to the other Jedi Masters and particularly Anish for making this. Anish has been on some of these episodes. Like they put some solid work into finding channels that are positive, that are not trying to create controversy, and also giving like some fair warnings on some channels that are. So one in particular that I'm going to highlight, I'm going to do like, let's do like social media like sites, right? Because I'm very into social media for reasons I don't understand. And so who would have thought it's addictive? But so for YouTube, I'm a fight guy. If you want to learn some good fighting, Mike Starwalker is a great guy for fighting. He's in one of the Lucasfilm affiliated groups. So obviously he's not going to be spitting out like, The Last Jedi is the worst. He's not going to spit out that because, you know, he's in an affiliated costuming fan group. He would get in trouble. He's a member of the Saber Guild, I believe, from Texas. He's a really good resource if you want to learn fight choreography and you already have seen all of my fight choreo videos. Hint. He will break down movie fights and show you how to do each of the movie fights, and he creates his own fights that are really creative. And he's one of the better performers I've seen out there. Like he really does a really good job. He's got good physicality for the most part, and he makes sure to break it down in a way that you understand. So if you're looking for like a teacher type YouTuber, that's a good one. If you're looking just for upbeat positivity on YouTube, Star Wars IRL doesn't post very often anymore, but his videos are all a bunch of positivity. He's got a rather amusing set of videos where he goes through and tries to wire a lightsaber by hand. and discovers it's very hard. And he also called out one of the particularly notorious YouTubers who puts out bad content. He's done one or two video essays that do things like that, where he did a really, really interesting one that I highly recommend on one of the flashpoints in the Fandom Menace, which is the lightsaber, the Skywalker lightsaber. Who owns the Skywalker lightsaber? What do you call it? He did a whole breakdown where he's like, okay, let's use property law and find out who would own this. Spoiler alert, it was Rey. But so
Some people would disagree with you on that.
some people would be wrong. The law doesn't care what you believe. But so for good or bad, we're not gonna be controversial here. So that's YouTube. I've given up on not being controversial. I'm sorry to our editors. I'm sorry to the fellow Jedi Masters. You're gonna get flamed for me. So for TikTok, I'll also throw some TikTok names out there. Of people like I follow. So there's some very good humorous Star Wars content out there. So like Darth Xandra, Xandra is a good one. Lots of like dad jokes with Star Wars and lightsabers. That's fun. If you want something wholesome, there's an account now that has a battle droid that was 3D printed, and they dress it up, and it like gives like wholesome content called Mr. Roger Rogers. It's my favorite thing. I hope it stays wholesome because honestly, it's great. Most of the bigger Star Wars TikTokers are also pretty solid. So I'm thinking like Sleia's is pretty good. And is pretty big. Carly King is pretty good, and she's pretty big. Luke's lightsabers is pretty decent. If you want to see some really spectacular lightsaber fighting, there's a Russian lightsaber school called the School of Saber Fighting. They have both a YouTube and a TikTok presence and an Instagram presence. They were the ones that went viral, I think. If I remember correctly, they're the ones who went viral a few years ago because they did a performance at a fencing championship, and everyone lost their minds because it was good. Yeah, I mean, and then for podcasts, anybody want to say anything about podcasts outside of listen to ours?
I don't listen to podcasts. I don't even listen to our podcast because I'm in it.
Oh
so-
god.
Rough.
I guess we could always shout out the Castle One Relay. They have some pretty long episodes, normally to 2 or 3 hours, and they cover like a lot of different aspects, like books, comics, occasionally if there's any new episodes, TV shows. And yeah, they're like really wholesome and all-encompassing. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm also going to shout out a podcast that hasn't podcasted in a while. But Rexin' Around was always a really good one. That was a podcast made by a cosplayer who cosplays Captain Rex, along with his friends who also cosplay. If you out there in the world have bought a Super 73 bike, he also like runs that company. Really cool dude. I've met him. He's a nice guy. He doesn't podcast as often anymore. I believe he was actually in Kenobi too, so lucky jerk. No, but yeah, he's a good one as well. And of course, there's the affiliated podcast, Kyber Sisters. That one also hasn't posted in a little bit last I checked, but they're also really good. I guess I just want to start a fight. Do y'all have any creators you would recommend these viewers not listen to or watch?
Me personally, I don't know because, like I've said, I don't watch people.
If you care for anything pop culture, avoid geeks and gamers like the plague. Like, I don't even think he cares about anything. It's just like, ooh, is this on Twitter trending? Let me make 10 videos about this. It's like, why?
Just hearing his name made some vomit come up in my mouth. Just I'd also throw in there personally, like this is one that it's tough because they kind of fall into the category you mentioned earlier where they were solid and then they kind of fell off the radar. And that would be Star Wars Theory. I think that we can't necessarily have a conversation to the Fandom Menace without bringing up that person's channel, just because they are the largest Star Wars YouTube channel in existence right now. And they used to be big fans of, The Last Jedi, and they'll probably, if they ever hear this, make a clickbaity video that will get us many views about how, no, that's a lie. I always hated it. But the challenge with Star Wars content creators, like it's easy with a group like Geeks and Gamers, because they've just always kind of consistently been like, Star Wars is politics now and it's awful. But like there are creators out there that it's kind of hard, like Star Wars Theory, because before The Last Jedi, his videos were a decent source of Star Wars content. The fan film project he was doing was a little much, because he would talk about how it's better than everything else, and it's like 8 minutes. But like, um, that's one that I personally, at this point in time, would not recommend, and is one that I think is important to mention because they are so big. But they have started going into the Disney has ruined everything. It's ruined my childhood type train. I do a lot of live streams to talk about how it sucks. And Star Wars Theory is of a size that his channel is monetized. He makes a decent amount of money, like a living, off of just complaining. Like, not even anything, just complaining. So, like, that's one that I feel kind of has to be mentioned. But that does lead to a question that I want to hear from both of you. Star Wars fan content and monetization. What do we think?
As long as it's fair use, it's very good. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of like the copyright system, but as we currently live under a fair use system, we have to follow that. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say for that.
I'm pretty much of the same opinion. I really haven't thought about it that much because I mean, if like for as far as Star Wars content creators go, like if you are like making your own content, like and you're allowed to make money off of it, then great. I know like with copyright laws, like a lot of people aren't allowed to make money off the stuff that they do, but like if you want to do it anyway, great. It's really not something that I spend a lot of time forming an opinion on.
I mean, fair enough. My worry with the monetization is I agree with Suthanth, by the way. Copyright systems in the United States is really broken. But my worry is that if you think about these larger channels and networks that exist that are putting out a lot of negative, everything is bad and you should hate it content, it seems like with monetization, there's almost an incentive there to continue pushing out that content. Even if you end up changing your opinion and liking the stuff, putting on a facade and saying it's all bad because it's how you make money. And you can make a lot of money saying that Star Wars is bad. Um, so my wondering that keeps that hits the back of the mind at 3 a.m. when you're trying to sleep and you're just not, is what kind of system are we creating that incentivizes people to be more angry at franchises and at media material if that anger makes more money than joy?
It's just incredibly messed up, and you can kind of think of it as an offshoot of clickbait, where it's like, ooh, click on this to find out what's weird about some random character in episode 3 and how that relates to episode 4 somehow. That's kind of fine, excusable even. But now in like, I guess since we're mainly talking about YouTube and like other long form things and how the algorithm normally favors watch time and stuff like that, you're more likely to get involved into or involved and engaged into rage-filled content. So it could be like, I might not like this episode of Book of Boba Fett. You might get like 10 views for that, but if you say, I hate Book of Boba Fett, it ruins something, people are more likely to be interested because unfortunately that's how internet clickbait's kind of ruined their people's brains.
Yeah, people like drama and they like arguing, and unfortunately, that's what makes money. And in my opinion, like if that's the way you want to go, if you want to make that kind of content and make money that way, that's fine. I'm just not going to watch your content. I won't watch your content anyway because I don't watch anybody's content. But like you telling everyone your trash opinions, like I don't care. If you make money that way, great. I'm still going to complain about it on our podcast because it's funny and it'll get us views, but you know, to each his own.
That's a big mood. This opens two questions that pop up, that I'll start with the first one that relates to what you just said, Liam, and then hopefully I will still remember the next one later. but both of you mentioned how it can kind of create like these circular like tracks where people love to argue, and then like Suthanth mentioned, you could just kind of start going into your own rabbit hole of like angry, like very rough content, right? That just keeps getting fed to you. So for those who do like the movies and are kind of tired of interacting with the Fandom Menace, or having the Fandom Menace even dominate the conversation, which I would guess is the majority of fans, because most fans don't go walking around every day going, "Yeah, this was awesome." You know, like they're not broadcasting their opinion, if they're normal people, to every single person they meet. What do y'all think those fans can do to be able to, I guess, counter this rising tide of anger and hate at the franchise?
Don't hate watch. Like if you dislike a creator's content, like if you don't like Star Wars Theory, don't watch his videos to see what he's talking about that you disagree with. Like even if you don't consider yourself a part of the Fandom Menace, you just want to like stay on like what's going on with these other creators. Don't do that, because every view they get, even if it's not because you want to support this person, supports them. Any kind of interaction on their accounts supports them. It doesn't matter if it's a hate comment or a praise comment. It like you click on their video, they get money. Just ignore it.
And also, if you want to have like a argument with someone who's like, I'm not the biggest fan of something in like real life, it's always best to like not meet them on their own terms. So whenever they make a assumption, you always have to be prepared to counter that by probably pages and pages of of research. So it's probably the best to just ignore them outright if you ever meet someone who's like, blah blah blah, ruined my life.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point from both of you, in that I think they both speak to, you need to disconnect, right, from the
Exactly.
people that are angry. Yeah, don't give them your attention. But I think there's also something that we can do that kind of works into the next question I'm going to ask, which I think Liam already probably is starting to get a little bit of a talk in my head of what I'm going to transition to. But like these groups that hate Star Wars, they'll pump out 3 videos a day. It's a mass number, like calculated move to just swarm the internet with content. So something that positive Star Wars fans can do is create their own channels, like create their own podcasts, create their own networks, their own fan films, and then promote that to others, so that we can create our own rabbit hole. Because as Liam mentioned, every single click gets YouTubers money, either through ad revenue or through giving them enough analytic metrics that they can then market their channel to sponsors, right? Those are the 2 primary way YouTubers make money: ads and sponsors. So if you don't click, they don't get ads. You don't click, their metrics go down, they don't get sponsors, right? But the other way you can do it is deliberately crowding the market in a way where we try and encourage people who are making positive content to do well enough that they get the ads, that sponsors are more willing to work with them. Because sponsors will go wherever there are a lot of views, right? But most companies generally will prefer something that's less controversial. If the less controversial isn't getting as many views, they're still going to go with views. But if there is a less controversial option that is within a good like margin of error closeness to other content out there in views, sponsors will jump ship, because they would rather something that in the end gets them less controversy over time, because it's a brand image thing. So there is that, which leads into another question that I think Liam saw coming. Hey, we're sitting here making our own content, for be it a fan film and this podcast. So for both of you, I would love to hear your perspectives on how dealing with the Fandom Menace has changed how we create these projects, how we talk about these projects, and what we talk about and do in our projects.
I'm not really sure I'm the one to even answer this question, because of my lack of experience with the Fandom Menace, like I've managed to stay out of it. So I'm just here kind of like the content that I provide to the film and this podcast, like is really not influence. It probably is subconsciously influenced, and I can't just think of it right now, but there's no influence off the top of my head that I can think of that like makes me say the things that I say.
Personally, I would say it's just made me feel like I'm gonna walk on eggshells where most times it's like, okay, I always have to add a bit more of the forced positive attributes to this, say, just to counter like the obvious negative criticisms. And I also have to be incredibly careful about what I criticize and like, no, I'm not criticizing this about diversity or stuff like that. I'm just criticizing it because I thought it was kind of weird. And it just makes talking about Star Wars kind of difficult.
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase we've been using in the fan film production side that I think kind of fits into this as well, where we call it fan bait, where it's like that little deep cut or that little cameo or that little mention is kind of fan bait, but also at the same time, you're looking at the fan bait where it's like, how can I directly counter the fandom menace? So like they complain a lot about like the types of representation in their films. So what do? We made representation an important, like, critical aspect of writing our script in our fan film, where we're like, no, Star Wars is for everyone, and so we want to make sure that we try as hard as possible to make Star Wars for everyone in our film. We're producing a fan film. We write the rules of how our fan film works. Um, when we were looking at that script, we're like, hey, how can we make the characters as interesting as possible? And how do we make the characters all different? They're not the same carbon copy. They're not the same demographics. They're not the same person. They are all different in their own unique Star Warsy way that shows that Star Wars is for everyone, right? I feel like that is also something that's kind of come up, at least in the fan film side, where it's like our positivity. You mentioned forced positivity, Suthanth. In a sense, it's that for us as well, even though we've got a kind of dark and gritty fan film. We went out of our way to like, hey, can we include a deep cut? I'm going to throw the challenge. Here's the gauntlet for everyone who's watching this or listening to this. It's a podcast. When you watch the fan film, when it comes out several months down the line, there's a holiday special reference in there. Find it. Like, um, but we quoted a lot of stuff too. That like we quoted the High Republic in our script deliberately, very, very deliberately and overtly. We quoted the Clone Wars TV show in the script. We rewrote some Clone Wars lines to fit in there. And one of the lines from the Clone Wars that is the most heartbreaking, I won't tell you which one because no spoilers, but one of the most heartbreaking lines in all of Clone Wars is in the fan film word for word. So I think that that's kind of something also that is a good thing. Like if you're out there and you're not a Fandom Menace person and you're listening to this podcast, all three of the things that are mentioned were like the forced positivity, but like still keeping it upbeat and like qualifying your criticism where you're like, no, I'm not criticizing the whole franchise. This is just one thing, as well as like making a conscious effort to make sure that you're not like appeasing like the Fandom Menace, that you're doing your own thing and like showing Star Wars to everyone. I think those are good ways to possibly counter the Phantom Menace as well.
Now that you've talked about it, I do remember an influence that I had when one of our characters in the fan film is non-binary, and I remember that the Star Wars Instagram account announced that in a new comic series there were two new non-binary characters, and I went into the comments of that post. Big mistake, most disgusting comment section I've ever seen in my entire life. And I was thinking about that moment when I decided to make this character non-binary for this film.
Yeah, and I mean, like going into those comments section, anybody else have flashbacks with hearing that to the comment section when The Rise of Skywalker came out and it featured the first same-sex kiss in a Star Wars franchise thing? Which, by the way, I'm sorry, that is like the safest controversy. You had a same-sex kiss in the background for 3 seconds? That's safe. Okay?
I was so excited to see that in the theater, like in the moment, but after the fact, I was so pissed that they just I told it was like I can't even believe that I caught it when I was watching it in theaters, and I've only watched the movie once. If I hadn't caught it, I would only know about it via the internet. But like I happened to catch that. I was like, yay, same-sex couple. And no, it was blurry in the background, and not everyone who watched the movie in theaters saw it.
Willow has better gay representation than Star Wars.
I went in kind of like completely blind to episode 9, except for the fact that Palpatine returns. And the fact that there was a same-sex kiss. And I'm like, okay, I assume that means Finpo is now canon?
Oh my God.
Don't we all wish?
Me?
No, it's a background. It's two background characters that they don't ever give the name of.
Actually, they did
Like,
name them like
oh, did
outside
they?
of the film.
They did.
Outside of the film, that doesn't
Yeah,
count.
like what they did with all the side, like all the extra characters in the original trilogy, like they give them all names in the visual dictionaries and stuff. They named the background lesbians, and I don't remember what their names are, but oh, they did get their own comic series.
I mean, that's nice, but can I see it on screen?
Yeah, exactly. Animate that.
Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you right now, Disney, you're probably not listening to me, which is probably a good idea for you. But if you are listening to me and you are foolish enough to do so, I'm going to throw this out there. I'm a straight white guy. I would love to see a non-straight couple on screen in Star Wars for an extended period of time. Make him a main character. I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it. Now, I mean, I will also piss off some Star Wars fans out there and saying that I was not on the Finn Poe train because I actually did ship Finn and Rose. I thought that was very cute. But like I would have literally no problem with a like same-sex character on screen existing. And apparently the internet is so concerned and listens a little bit too often to the opinion of straight white guys. So you heard it from the source. We would love to have more representation in Star Wars because every time they say, "Why am I not represented?" I'll go, "Luke, Han, how are you not represented?" So yeah, I think that I don't think you're going to have nearly as much pushback, Disney, from the fans if you do.
Mark Hamill literally supports the Luke is gay theory.
I mean, I'd support that theory. That'd be a vibe.
So Disney, consider that.
Yeah, Mara Jade does not exist in this
Mara
new
Jade does
canon.
not.
She does not exist in the new canon. Go for it, Disney.
Yeah, Disney erased Mara Jade. That was their fault.
Hey, here's okay. So here's a pitch, Disney. The Lor Santeca, guy who died in the beginning of episode 7. We know in the comics he hangs out with Luke a lot, then nerd out over Jedi artifacts. Can that be a thing? Like that's stable basis for a relationship. They got good communication. They have shared interests. They spend a lot of time together. They respect each other's jobs, professions, and goals in life. That sounds like the healthiest relationship we'd have in Star Wars. So I don't know. Can we make that a thing? I would love to see it. I stand it. Look, I'm shipping that now. I didn't ship it before, but now that I think about it, I'm shipping it now.
They already have a better relationship than Anakin and Padme.
They have a better relationship than every relationship in Star Wars.
Yeah. Something else I think we should talk about is toxic fandoms, like specifically for maybe the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy. Forces of Destiny is definitely something we should talk about. I've never seen it personally, but I know that it got a lot of criticism.
Suthanth is rubbing his hands. He's ready to go to talk about Forces of Destiny. I think we should start there.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is gonna like kind of cut into our timeline of Star Wars media episode, which is like gonna be months down the line. But just to put bring everyone up to speed, like Forces of Destiny was this like Flash animated show in like 2017, 2016, where it was just literally made to sell a doll line for like baby girls, like 1 to 6-year-olds. No, not important whatsoever to like the lore of Star Wars, but it's like was unfortunately announced at Star Wars Celebration. So all of the 40-year-old, 50-year-olds who grew up watching the prequels, original trilogy were like, ooh, more Star Wars media for me. And that's like a fair criticism, and that's kind of like why, for lack of a better word, normal people get sucked into a toxic fandom. Because back then we were in pretty much a Star Wars media drought. We had got the movies, we had Rebels a bit, and we're starting to get a bunch of the comics, but we didn't have any of these Disney Plus shows. So it's like maybe, let's say 4-ish hours of Star Wars media a year compared to like 15 plus we get now. So yeah, basically a bunch of adults watched this show, which was probably on the Star Wars YouTube channel alongside Disney XD or like one of the sister Disney channels. And then a bunch of adults were like, okay, this isn't for me. This just focuses on little girls to sell this $4 or $5 line. And it's like, okay, this is political. I don't see any male character in this. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, read the room. You have enough media literacy. for this, and apparently not. So back when YouTube still had the like button, I remember these were like some of the most disliked videos on the Star Wars channel. Like it's like 2K 200 likes to like 20K dislikes. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And then you just had a bunch of like hateful comments, and it's like, made for children, use your brain, please. And then apparently I assume they were like contractually supposed to make season 2 or something for either by people who made the dolls or like the people who were producing the show. And yeah, season 2 was released like a year or so later, and there was like I don't even assume there was a trailer for it. It was like, okay, here's season 2, let's just dump it there. And nobody cares about it at all, because by that time people were just moved on from like hating on this kids show to hating on the movies. And by now there's like no shows technically for the target audience. Like The Mandalorian and its expanded universe focuses mainly to like 30 to 40-year-olds. We technically have the Bad Batch, but it still kind of leans to like teenagers and everything. And kind of right now we're in a place where there's no kids Star Wars content, which is actively bizarre to me, because like for most of my life and for most of everyone's life, Star Wars content has been dominated for like not exactly made for kids, but it's like targeted to kids. And there's like nothing for new Star Wars fans who are like under the age of 10, not right now.
It's always so weird to me when people criticize a show like Forces of Destiny or honestly any animated Star Wars content for not like appealing to their age group, because Star Wars is such a huge saga that it doesn't make sense for there not to be content for every age group. And I don't understand why other people don't understand that. Like not all the Star Wars content is going to be targeted towards you. You're more than welcome to watch it, obviously. Like I try to watch like as much Star Wars content as I can. I do plan on watching Forces of Destiny eventually. I just haven't gotten around to it. But like not everything is going to be targeted to the teenagers / adults that watch Star Wars in theaters, or even like the kids. I think my dad actually watched it in theaters when he was 5 years old. And like personally, if I had a 5-year-old, I probably wouldn't have taken him to see Star Wars. But like everyone that watched it in theaters and then grew up, like new Star Wars content, some of it is not going to be for you. And I just don't understand why people can't get that through their heads.
Yeah, I think it's been a while, but if memory serves, Resistance got the same kind of flack, where that's a kid's show, and it had the double whammy of it was being explicitly set in the post Disney buyout era of the sequel trilogy, and it got a lot of flack for people being like, "Oh, it's too much of a kid's show," and my worry is, you have a show like, let's do one of the adult shows, right? You have a show like The Mandalorian. Season 1 of The Mandalorian was a genre show. It was a Western in space with a lone gunman. It had all of the classic from, Italian countryside spaghetti Western shows, like films. It had all of those elements in a Star Wars show. Season 2 of The Mandalorian was much more broad. It brought a lot more of the wider galaxy in. And you look at the criticism of the people who say, hey, this show wasn't made for me. And you worry that the only Star Wars content we'll get is either super broad, non-genre shows where people are very safe, or genre shows that take the rather like quasi-elitist route of like the Oscars when they complain about major media and go for prestige television, where Andor was very, very good. And those filmmakers were very, very good. But they purposefully targeted that prestige television market while making it. And I feel like that's the only reason they were able to get away with doing a genre show. In this era of the toxic fandom, are we going to get another Forces of Destiny or Resistance ever? Like, even the Bad Batch is like, the marketing for it, clearly the age group they're targeting is 5 to 10 years older than the original Clone Wars series.
Yeah, I can see your worries, especially since that I don't think we have any like actual Star Wars movies in the pipeline right now. I know Rogue Squadron's in this weird area ever since Wonder Woman 1984, but I feel like there should be more, or I just might be blanking.
I guess the thing with the Star Wars on-screen stuff is that it's following a similar path to the old EU. If anyone remembers the old EU, back in the day before Disney bought it, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, that ancient time that was all of like 6 years ago. Back then, the old EU, the films were very safe, if you think about it comparatively. Like, there was some elements that could be considered a risk in, say, the prequels. But for the most part, like we mentioned earlier in this podcast, the prequels took a pretty safe route for their criticism. They were still basically saying anything other than exactly what we have right now is bad. But if you read the old comics and the old books, there were people that were seeking to put representation into those old comics and books that we didn't even have in the larger like sphere of our society when we're discussing it. And there was content for every single age. There were early reader books that were like 20 pages long and told a story. There was like the Obi-Wan Kenobi Jedi Apprentice series, where it was very much targeted towards like older elementary, younger middle. There was the Jedi Academy series that was clearly going for that high school market. There was like different age group markets, and they were able to pursue stories that, like, if you think about it, young adult, like in the literary sense, young adult books are always a little bit edgier than grown adult books. Like, they were able to pursue representation you don't even think about yet. You had main characters that were aliens, that were completely different species, and you had every demographic-looking person under the sun who existed in the Star Wars universe, because in the books, you're not worried about appealing to a mass market, right? You had characters talking about religious diversity in Star Wars in, like, 2010. That's not a thing that we were having in our society as a discussion of. Like, you had openly, like, not even like openly like different like monarchy, you had like openly pagan full societies in Star Wars when we haven't even reached that discussion now. And so the worry is, like, are we going to develop the current EU of Star Wars, the current Disney era, where, if you think about it, I think it was Liam who mentioned there are openly like non-binary characters in the comics. We haven't seen it on film. Is it going to kind of fall into that same trap where if you want to find representation of your demographic group, you have to go read a book or a comic? You can't see it on screen. If you want something literary, you want to read a Star Wars horror thing, you have to read Tales from Vader's Castle. You can't watch an openly Star Wars horror film, which would be insane, by the way. Disney, please make something in the horror genre specifically for Star Wars, because there's some scary crap in Star Wars, like, that I would love to be scared of on screen. Like, my question is, do y'all foresee that we will get that representation on screen right now, or do you foresee an era where, because of this conversation with the Fandom Menace, it's only off screen?
I certainly don't see on-screen representation happening, at least within the next 10 years or so, because when you really get down to it, it really is about appealing to their mainstream audience and then making money from them. And if they put something like something representative in there that they know a lot of people are going to criticize, then they start to fear that they won't, make the money that they would have made if they just stuck to what they know is safe.
Yeah, I kind of agree as well. Regardless of whatever Disney strategy or Lucasfilm strategy is for releasing more Star Wars movies, I doubt we'll see like an openly gay protagonist anytime soon. I feel like it might be kind of different with the TV shows. With all of the Disney Plus shows, I feel like a lot of them are predominantly a straight, presumably white guy as a protagonist. But I've heard some things about the Acolyte, the one which is being set in the High Republic. And I believe the main character is supposed to be non-binary, or at least their actor playing them is. So I hope they can slowly, gradually bring things into at least the smaller screens.
Yeah, and we've also like kind of seen this type of thing happening where they try to bring in representation and it fails because of people in the Fandom Menace who criticize it too heavily, like in the sequel trilogy, having a Black main character. That set a lot of people off. Kelly Marie Tran, a Asian side character, that set a lot of people off. A lot of people were criticizing those actors. And like, I love Kelly Marie Tran, and I remember like she was getting so much hate from the internet that she just left social media completely. Like the people that criticize representation, like they do damage, and it's just horrible to have to watch as someone who wants to see representation in the newer content.
I think that honestly, sadly, right now is kind of what the legacy of Star Wars fans is that we have a history of destroying careers and destroying actors. They did Kelly Marie Tran dirty, with and John Boyega dirty, with how they ended up using those characters, and I think it was entirely because of the movement of fans. Kelly Marie Tran is a great actress. I can't hate on her. She's one of the few San Diego actresses who've made it in the larger acting world. She did a really good job at the character she was handed, and her character's story, come at me, fanboys, made sense. I think that her character was one of the few times Star Wars actually kind of prodded the bear a little bit and was like, hey, the people who make money off suffering are a problem. It didn't do that before, right? That is a touchy subject to try and make media on, because the parallels to that in the real world people who are making money off people suffering, they have a lot of power. So it's a touchy topic to touch on. So you were already going to get shade from certain corners of the internet because she was basically making a criticism on completely unfettered capitalism, where you can make money selling guns to everybody and their cousin. And then the fact that she was a person of color talking to another person of color, right, about the system, quote unquote. I think that in and of itself was something that was a choice that needed to be made in Star Wars. Like, it had to happen eventually. Otherwise, all these questions they raised in the prequels of, what democracy looks like, they would kind of be for nothing, But it was really, I was kind of fucking pissed when I saw just how hard people went down on those two actors, John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran. And I'll throw Daisy Ridley in there too, because she got a lot of criticism for, daring to be a woman, which is incredibly obnoxious. And all three of them had to have really challenging, relationships with social media. And it became prominent when, like, John Boyega at one point, he went to a protest supporting political beliefs of his because he's a human being who is allowed to have opinions and beliefs, right? And immediately people were calling for him to have a diminished role in the franchise. And you got to ask, hey, is this why his lines in The Rise of Skywalker was basically just Rey ? It's one of the darker sides of fandom where it's like, is this our legacy, as a community, that we just destroy actors?
One thing I remember about the criticisms of Daisy Ridley was that a lot of people were calling her a Mary Sue, which I disagree with. I'm not really going to get into why, but I disagree with that. But also, so was Luke, if you think about it. If you apply the same logic you apply to Rey being a Mary Sue to Luke, he is also a Mary Sue. And that's just something I want to throw out there because it pissed me off when people were saying that Rey's character was a Mary Sue when you have Luke literally right there, who I rarely ever see getting criticism.
Not Liam, pop off. Me and Suthanth have popped off. It's your turn. Tell us why Rey is not a Mary Sue, because I also agree that she is not a Mary Sue. But I want to hear you talk about your side of it because it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I haven't watched episode 7 or 8 in a pretty long time, so it's not going to be very in depth. If I had watched them before recording this episode, we could have an entire podcast episode talking about why Rey isn't a Mary Sue. But the main thing I remember is people criticizing that she was able to just fight with a lightsaber almost immediately. So was Luke. She also grew up on Jakku learning to fight with a stick. She knows how to fight with a stick. A lightsaber is like, it was like her stick was like a bow staff or whatever equivalent it would be. A lightsaber, like, it's not exactly the same, but it's still a stick. Still knows how to fight with a stick. And people were like, oh no, she shouldn't be able to fight with a lightsaber. She's never ever like touched one in her life before. She's touched similar weapons and knows how to fight with them. And like, why wouldn't she be able to fight? She's growing up in a very like hostile environment, probably grew up around a lot of people who tried to hurt her. She needed to learn how to fight. And okay, so we don't see that in the film because it starts when she's an adult and it starts when her hero's journey starts. Like, they're not going to show us her entire backstory before we see the hero's journey. But that's the main thing that always pisses me off when people say she's a Mary Sue, because like that's usually the main argument they bring up, is that she automatically knows how to fight with a lightsaber. And no, she's been fighting with some kind of stick almost her entire life. She knows what she's doing. Also, actually, I'm gonna keep going on this guy because
keep going.
yeah. Along that same argument, people start to I've had people tell me like, oh, well, like, how does she beat Kylo Ren? Like, he's been training with the Force and training with an actual lightsaber longer. When they fought in episode 7, he was injured. I don't remember if he was shot or stabbed or something, but he was injured and like not at his best. And he was like angry and emotional. And like there was a whole bunch of stuff hindering his ability to fight Rey. Rey was like ready to go. She wasn't injured. She was also kind of angry because Han just died. But like there was that moment when she like remembered, like, oh, I'm supposed to like, calm down, listen to the Force, whatever. Like, they zoomed in on her face and she like breathed deeply and they had that whole moment. And Kylo was still there, like just fucking screaming and also bleeding out and almost fucking dying. Like, of course she beat the shit out of him. Of course she did.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw out there because, like, from a fight standpoint, everything you've raised is the exact argument I make about why she's on a Mary Sue. From a fight standpoint, also, like, Kylo wasn't just injured; he was severely injured. He was shot with a bowcaster that can cause explosions in his hip. The joint that you need to move in order to fight, right? So there's that one. 2, up until she like learns to like calm down and focus, Rey's actually fighting pretty badly. Like, Kylo is just wiping the floor with Rey for the beginning of that fight. From a fight standpoint, she's not holding her own very well. People made the same argument about John Boyega fighting with like, how can he suddenly fight? But we know he can because he was riot trained and it's canonical and we see it on screen. And I'm going to throw this out there. I've had people who argue like, oh, she probably isn't eating well because it's an impoverished world. And like, this world's not going to have access to good training. I'm going to tell you right now, all of you out there who are coming from like a middle-class background and then got a black belt in some martial art and are saying that that's why you are better at this. The art that you got your black belt in probably came from a country that at some point had the exact same thing that was going on Jakku happen in that nation. Like, karate came from a poor, impoverished island. Like, Taekwondo, post-Civil War Korea. Like, all of the most famous martial arts on the planet, they come from a place where you need to learn to fight well in order to do okay. One of the most popular martial arts right now is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know where the best place to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is? One of them? Some of the best fighters on earth right now are coming out of favelas. Because knowing how to fight can be the difference between being able to scare off an attacker and having that attacker approach you, right? So Rey being able to fight, living on a planet like Jakku, we see the real world parallels for pretty much every single popular martial art, where the time period where those arts developed was either a time of poverty for a nation or a time of war, right? So it is not anywhere near outside the realm of possibility for Rey to know how to fight really well. That's honestly the expectation, because that's how it works in our world, in history. We know this is how it works, right? It would be weirder if you had a character like, I love her, but it would be really weird if you had our first appearance of Leia be her beating the crap out of someone, because she's royalty. They don't have to fight. And the nice thing about Star Wars is those characters who don't have a lot of exposure to fight training, you don't see them fight very often. Leia's realm is politics. She's a really good leader. She's really good at working the political sphere. We know this about her. We see it on screen. Rey is a fighter. She comes from a place where fighting is very necessary in order to survive. She grew up fighting. with a stick. Fun fact for people on the internet: fighting with a staff, fighting with a sword, not as different as you think. I've done both. So I think that all those points that you raised, Liam, about Ray being a Mary Sue, they're points that I think feed into what we saw earlier, where they just like you create a narrative in your head, you have a head canon, and you see anything that is outside of that as political and as not being real, not being valid. But like there is, I personally, I would be upset if the character of Ray couldn't fight because I would not understand how she survived on Jakku for her whole life as an orphan alone, no less. Like I would not understand. We know Jakku is unsafe. We've seen people get assaulted on screen at Jakku. Like it's established in the like pretty early on in the movie. It's a dangerous place. So yeah, I agree 1,000%. Anything to add, Suthanth?
I mean, not much. I feel like you two covered pretty much everything there is to talk about the sequel trilogies and how they treated their actors. I feel like the unfortunate thing is this isn't new for Star Wars fans. I mean, just going back, I want to say 20 years, the things being done to like Ahmed Best, Jake Lloyd, and even Hayden Christensen to some extent during the prequels were just severe and, if anything, representative of what things would be in the future.
Yeah, thinking about how the fandom treated Ahmed Best like breaks my heart every time I think about it because I mean I'm not the biggest Jar Jar fan. Like I don't hate him. I think he's funny. I mean I love honestly like guilty pleasure of mine the Jar Jar centric episodes in the Clone Wars. I think they're hilarious. The one oh my god I forget what the episode's called, but when he has to impersonate the Gungan boss and talk to Grievous, that's one of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars ever. But just it's so unfortunate that the fandom like treated him so badly that trigger warning he attempted suicide and it just breaks my heart to think about that and to think that people like really thought through like in their head like oh I'm gonna say whatever bullshit they said to some like someone they don't even know just because they didn't like his character. It had nothing to do with him. Like he was an actor who portrayed a character. His character had to be influenced by the writing, which was awful, and the directing, which I mean, I don't.
Also awful.
Was all okay, great. I can't speak to that. I've never been a director or whatever, but like it was not his fault and it's the same with other actors too. Like people always blame the actors. It's not the actor's fault at all. Like Jake Lloyd, he was bullied out of acting after episode 1. And I love episode 1 and part of the reason is young Anakin. I love young Anakin. I think he's adorable. And then also Hayden Christensen. Like nowadays people are all over him, but back in the day I remember people like were just ragging on his performance as Anakin, which in my opinion like today, I mean I personally wasn't a big fan of it when I first watched the prequels. I didn't think it was that great, but you know, going back and like just like knowing more about like the filmmaking process and everything, both him and Natalie Portman, like they honestly like they did the best with what they had. Like they had to work with shitty writing and shitty directing, and like that was honestly the best we could get. And I mean, I applaud them for like working with such crappy circumstances in that film.
Yeah, also they had to work with some not necessarily the best decision ever made casting. I will die on this hill. Keira Knightley was great as the like stand-in for the Queen. I really wish they had swapped those two roles like consistently because I think that having those three over the 3 movies in the swap roles would have been a better fit. But you know, we don't make those decisions. And I think if we overly criticize those decisions, it just falls into the same trap that the people who personally attack these actors fall into. And it warms my heart, honestly, genuinely, that Disney took what should not have been a controversial stance in bringing back both Hayden Christensen and Ahmed Best into the Star Wars universe. Hayden Christensen, obviously, in the flashbacks in Kenobi. I would give a spoiler warning, but I think that's I don't really think that's a spoiler, seeing as it's a Kenobi show and Kenobi taught Anakin. But also like they brought back Ahmed Best for a kids show, right, on the YouTube channel, the Star Wars Kid YouTube channel, where he like does like this like game show that I wish they would have an adult version of. Because actually, that was fun. it warms my heart that both of those actors were in some way brought back into the franchise. And I think it's very reassuring. And I think we can all take some solace in when they brought Hayden Christensen out of Celebration and he got a standing ovation. I think that shows there are enough of us out there who are positive fans that if we put our mind to it just by being us, we can outdo anyone's negativity if we just apply it. Like seeing an entire audience go wild because the man who was bullied so hard that after the biggest franchise on earth, he went to indie films, suddenly get a standing ovation, that's heartwarming.
My biggest regret is always going to be that I wasn't in that room when that happened. I couldn't make it that day. I probably wouldn't have gotten into that panel even if I was there that day. But man, I wish I was there.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we're able to have a similar thing with Ahmed Best. That they bring his character from the little game show into the larger universe. Because, correct me, do we know if it has a time period his game show is set in outside of Jedi existing?
I don't believe so, but overall, the things being done to Jar Jar Binks' character post Rise of the Empire is kind of messy, to say the least. No aftermath spoilers here.
Yeah, I think the Jar Jar Binks, the time is done for him, unfortunately. But I think that since we don't know what time period the kids show takes place in, that does leave the opportunity that the actor Ahmed Best, without any CGI or anything, can appear as that character in pretty much any upcoming Star Wars material that has Jedi in it. Because we don't know when that kids show is set. I would love to see a central role for Ahmed Best in one of these upcoming shows. Any of them that have Jedi in it, but obviously a show like Ahsoka is probably out of the running there. But like they've got some shows taking place during the era of the Jedi. I would love to see his like Jedi kid show character be one of the central characters because I think we gave Hayden Christensen like the standing ovation. It's time we started extending that to the others who were bullied out of the industry as well, because they probably would get the same if we, as positive Star Wars fans, put it out there that we want to see more of these actors and make up for what the other Star Wars fans did. I think that could be really helpful in the future, and I would love to see it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is a good place to cut off our episode today. Just one more takeaway that I think we should give to the Fandom Menace. Do your fucking research before you criticize anything. Because it from some of our conversation today, it seems like a lot of the Fandom Menace talks about stuff that they just don't understand. Like we had Shane talking about like all of the fight stuff because he has experience with that. People criticizing the fights, you probably don't have experience with that. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is Triton Squadron signing off.